Descubre tu futuro. Descubre un nuevo tú. Descubre Lord's University.
Hello, I'm Katina Werner, here with Voces Latinas to talk with you about the law. I love the law and I want you to as well. Today we're going to talk a little bit about landlord-tenant and creating a relationship with a landlord. I want to talk with you about how easy this can be if you take the right steps. The right steps can be as easy as thinking about your hand. Your hand and its 5 fingers can help you remember 5 easy steps. First of all, I want you to stop before you create this relationship and not move into a relationship with the landlord until you have looked at least 5 places. You should not move into a place or create a contract until you have looked at several places to compare so that you know what is out in the market and you know what types of terms are offered by other landlords. So don't leave a deposit until you have thoroughly inspected the place, including making sure that if it's an apartment community, you've seen the actual apartment that you will move into. And make sure that you don't just talk about price, but that you ask other questions and you think about how professional the place is in answering your questions. Now let's look at number 4. I mentioned the word contract earlier. Consider the 4 corners of that contract. Look at every page of that contract, all 4 corners of that contract. If you have a dispute, the pages of that contract are all that you're going to have to carry into court and discuss that dispute. And that's what the court is going to have to decide who's right and who's wrong. So make sure that everything you have discussed verbally is in that contract and that there is nothing confusing and nothing contrary, nothing different than what you have discussed with this landlord. If there's anything different, make sure you cross it out before you sign it or that you cover that dispute carefully to your satisfaction before you sign it. Number 3, while looking at that contract and considering the terms that should be included, make sure that there are 3 important terms always included: price, process, and dates. The price of everything that includes money should be listed in that contract. So make sure, of course, the rent is included. Make sure you talk about what late fees will be included if you cannot pay rent on time. If you have pets, that the pet fees are included. If you have to move out early, if there will be any fees for that. What are the cancellation fees? Absolutely everything that might trigger a fee should be listed in that contract. Also make sure any pre-contract fees are discussed as well and that those are in writing, things like application deposits, security deposits, anything like that. And if there will be any charges to your deposit, that should be listed in your contract as well. Now, process is important, so things like notices. What kind of notice do you have to give your landlord before you move out? Most landlords require, and the state typically will enforce, a 30-day move-out notice, but not every landlord is the same, and they may require a longer notice. Likewise, if there is any kind of damage to your apartment or repairs that need to be taken care of, many landlords may require you to give notice a certain kind of way. So any type of notice that needs to be handled between you and your landlord should be discussed in that lease. If it's not, you should add it as to how that will be handled. Make sure their address, their phone number, and their email is listed in that lease so you know how you can get a hold of this person if you need to. Also, make sure you have discussed any important dates and that those dates are in the lease as well. Dates such as when you can move in and when you have to move out. Make sure all of those dates are covered. Make sure you also discuss the dates and that those dates are listed in the lease as to when your rent will be considered late. These dates are very important, as if you pay your rent late, it not only may add fees to your rent, it may also play a factor as to you being evicted and to your credit being impaired. Number 2, make sure as you're going through this entire process that you remember there's 2 people involved in a relationship here. Almost like a marriage, when you're in a contract, these 2 people are very important. You want to make sure the relationship between you, the tenant, and the landlord stays intact. You want to make sure you're professional and polite with your landlord while at the same time asking the questions that are important and making sure that you stay to all the terms of that contract. There may be a time that you need to ask your landlord a favor, unfortunately. You may need to pay rent late, you may need to move somebody else in, or you may need to ask that a pet be moved into the property that they hadn't necessarily wanted you to. Whatever it is, you may need a favor from this landlord, and that won't go over well if you haven't been kind to them. So make sure you preserve this relationship well so that if you do need an accommodation, they're more inclined to say yes. Otherwise, if you haven't handled yourself well or your end of the contract well, they will use that contract against you and in court, and they will evict you from this property. Before one signature goes on the contract, make sure you've considered everything that I've told you today, and make sure you also pay attention to your gut feeling. If anything seems off, just one word seems off in that contract, or your gut tells you something is off in the relationship between the 2 of you, between the tenant and the landlord, or anything at all does not seem right, if it doesn't seem to match what you've been told, do not put one signature on that contract. Do not move one thing into that place. Make sure you get a consultation with an attorney. It is very difficult to get you out of a contract that you have signed once you've signed it, and it is very difficult to protect your rights once you've already moved things into a place. It's much easier to help you if things have not gone as you've been promised before you've signed a contract and before you've moved something in. So make sure you talk with an attorney, preferably before you've signed a contract, and preferably before you have, of course, moved anything in, even if you have signed a contract. So look over the place carefully, look over the contract carefully, and make sure you know who you're contracting with. Now, I look forward to sharing more tips with you about landlord-tenant. I look forward to sharing more tips with you about other things such as consumer, employment, and all other types of information. You can visit our website, www.christianlegalcollaborative.org, for more information about clinics and information about other events coming up in the greater Toledo area. For those of you that are viewing Voice de Latinas in other viewing areas, I will be sure to get you information for where you can go in other areas as well. And make sure you click subscribe on the Voice de Latina channel, as well as like and subscribe to our Facebook channels for both Voice de Latinas as well as Christian Legal Collaborative. This is how we get our sponsors and bring more information to you. And for those of you that let us know that you've done this, at both our email addresses, I can send you all of this information in Espanol. Thank you so much, and remember, amo la ley.